Routing is essential when you build a single page application and you have to handle the routes somehow. Because when you have a single page application, you don't have routes in that sense because you're on the same page and your application needs to handle the routes. When you're using React, you probably use the Reach Router or React Router, and Reach Router is going to be deprecated, or maybe it even is deprecated, but I don't think so. And I'm going to merge them together into one router library, and that's React Router version 6. And if we look at the current version, it is on 5.1.2. You can actually use the version 6 today. So in this video, I'm going to show you how to use React Router version 6. And it's also going to be a good video in general about routing. The fundamentals are the same. React Router 6 uses a little bit simpler syntax, and you can easily translate it over to React Router 5 if you want to do that. So the first thing I'm going to do is to bootstrap an application with Create React App. So we're starting from scratch in this one. So I go inside of my terminal and into a folder where I want to create my application. Then I use npx create-react-app, and I'm going to call this one Weben-test-router, and we wait for it. That's our bootstrapped application, and if we look at the documentation, I'm in the documentation and advanced guides. They have a migration guide on going from version 5 to version 6. So they have some useful information here. And it's down below here. They show how you can install React Router version 6. So you have React-Router at 6. You can also use at next to get the latest version. So that's the one I'm going to use. So I clear the console. And of course, we have to navigate inside of the application that we just created. Weben-test-router. Like that. And then I npm install React-Router at next and React-Router DOM at next. And then we can open up our code editor, and we can also start up the application. npm start. It seems to be working, and that's great. Open up the console. We can see if something happens there. Okay, back to the code editor. I'm going to bump this up for you guys. Something like that, maybe. And I'm going to delete some files here, as usual. I could use my video on creating a Create React App template instead. I have a video on that in my channel. So look through my videos and you'll find that one. It's very, very convenient. You can create your own theme for Create React App and use that instead, and you don't have to remove or add all the stuff that you usually do when you create an application with Create React App. All right, setup test, service worker, logo, index.css, app.test.css, and app.css. I'm going to remove all of these ones. And that's because I'm not going to have any styling in this one. I want to focus on the routing itself. So that's why I remove these ones. And I have to change some stuff in the index. I remove this service worker. We don't have this CSS file here. So I remove these ones. Save the file. And also in the app, we can remove everything here inside of the app div. And for now, we can just type out app. We remove the CSS and the logo and save the file. And we can go back to the browser and see that it works, reload it. That's strange, actually. It should update itself. Okay, break it and npm start. Really strange. Yeah, here you have it. Guess it was some temporary bug there. All right, so we have the application running. So back inside of the code, we're going to create some new files. And for this one, I'm not going to have a nice structure or anything. So I'm going to create a few components inside of the src folder. So new file. And we have a file that we call home.js. That's going to be our home component. Import React from React. inside of that component. Const home equals an arrow function. And for now, we just have a div that says home. Export default home, auto format it, and that's our component. Save it, and also mark all the code and copy it because we're going to need it in the other components that we're going to create now. We're going to create 3 more pages. The home is our first page, so we create a page that we call page2.js, and another one, page3.js, and page4.js. So this one shouldn't be named like this. Rename. Shouldn't have a space there. Page 2, 3, and 4. So inside of page 2, paste the code, change home to page 2, like that. Do the same inside of page 3. Change it to page 3. And the same inside of page 4. Page 4. And save the file. So these are the components that we need for our application. Now we're going to start inside of the app component to set up our router. So up here, first we're going to import from the React Router DOM library. That's the only library that we're going to import something from. We don't actually import something from the React Router library. It's just there to get everything up and running and get it to work. So React Router DOM, that's the one that we're using because we're creating this application for the DOM. So that's why we use that library. We have the browser router, and this is the same as in the previous version. We have the routes. This one is new. Routes is a component that you can use instead of the switch component as you use in React Router 5. So we can go back to the documentation to check this out. You can see here you have this switch component, and that is before the 5.1 that you use this one. You don't do that anymore. We have the routes instead of the switch. So that's one of the changes in this one. And then we have the route itself. And we import them from React-Router-DOM. All right, so that's the components we're going to need from that library. Then we have to import the components themselves. So import home from ./home. And we also import page 2 from /page 2. Import page 3 from /page 3. We're not going to import page 4 here because we're not going to use that one here. We are going to use that as a nested component instead, and I'm going to show you that further on in this video. Okay, so that's our components, and now we can use them inside our app component here. So remove this app. First, we have our browser router. You have to wrap everything inside of the browser router, and you're probably going to do this very high up in your hierarchy of components. In this case, I'm doing it in the app component because I'm going to have some main routes. So that's why. So that's probably the most common use case when you set up your router. Do it high up in the hierarchy if you don't want to have nested routes and stuff like that. So we set up the router here. We wrap our complete application with the browser router component. You could also, of course, create it down below here, or you can also set it up in the index component, depending on how you want the structure of your application. Okay, so that's the browser router itself. Then we have the routes component, and that's the one that I talked about that is instead of the switch component that we used before. And inside this routes component, we're going to set up the routes for the different pages that you want to route to. So first, we have a route and we specify the path. And if we specify it as a / that means that's the root page, the start page of our application. And this is different in version 6. We have a prop that's called element, and inside of here we can have our page element. In this case, it's going to be home. So as you can see, this is much easier if you work with previous versions of React Router. It's very easy. If you want to send in some prop to this one, you can just specify them here as usual. You don't have to do any render prop and stuff like that to get your props to your components. So this is a much better syntax and easier to set up. So this is all you have to do to specify this route. And of course, we also have to self-close this one here. So this will show the home component when we have this route here. Do some auto formatting, save it, go back to our application. And as you can see, we're at the root now. So that's why it shows the home component. But if we change something here, you can see that we're not showing anything. We don't have a route for that one. But if we create an asterisk here and save it, go back to our application, you can see that it shows the home, because then it's going to use this route from what you specify here and all the descendants to that path. But we're not going to do that obviously for the root, because that's no good. It's going to show that route for every route below that one. So that's not good. Actually, I'm also going to bump up the font here, something like that, maybe. Okay, so that's the route for the home page. Then we create another route with a path. And these routes are relative. So we specify page 2. And we have the element equals. And we have the page 2 component. Capital P, like that. Self-close this route. And the last route, we have a path of page 3. I'm going to set up a param. In React Router, you can do that by specifying a colon, and we can call it whatever we want. I call it cool param because I think this is cool. So live with it. And we have the element and the page 3 component. And self-close it, do some auto formatting. So this one here, colon and the name of your param, and we can grab that information from the URL. So this is all the routes that we're going to need. So save it, go back to our application. Yeah, we have the home component. And if we specify / page 2, page 2, you can see that it shows the page 2 component and page 3. Yeah, we don't have something there because we have to specify this one here also. All right, because we have set up that in our route that we need to have this information here also. And we're actually going to have a / and an asterisk because we are going to show the page 4 component that we create here as a nested route to page 3. Okay. So that's the setup of our routes. That's the main stuff you have to do before you can use any routing inside of your application. Let's go inside of our home component and set up some routing to these pages by using the link component in the router library. So first, inside of home.js, we import link from React Router DOM. And this is the component you use when you navigate to different pages. Okay, so for now we just have a div here, create parentheses instead, and we can have a fragment, set up an h2 tag with a header, homepage. Then we use our link component, link to, and this one is going to link to page 2. You just specify it like a string here where we want to link this one. And inside the link, you can type in whatever you want. I have a p tag, go to page 2. And we also want to set up a link for our page 3. Link to equals page 3. And for this one, I specify this URL param here. So that's why we can set it up like this. I have a / and I want to send in some information now that we can grab in our application. So Webben is awesome. Like that. Then I have a p tag, go to page 3. Remove this one here. It shouldn't be a p tag. It should end the fragment. do some auto formatting. And this should be it for this component. So save it, go back to the application. We can go to our home page. And as you can see, we have two links here. This one is going to page 2. And the other one is going to page 3. So that's great. It's working. Let's go inside of the page 2 component and import link. Import link from React Router DOM. And here, just as before, we create parentheses, remove that one, create a fragment. We close the fragment, and inside the fragment, we create an h2 tag, page 2, and we create a new link, 2 equals /. This one is going to link to the home page. Go to home and do some auto formatting. Yeah, we can have a p tag also here, just to be consistent. Like that. Auto format it, save it, go back to our application, go to page 2, and you can see that we have the link that we can go back to the home page. So that's great. This is how you set up a basic routing system in your application, and hopefully you can see that it's not really that difficult, but routing can feel a little bit difficult. I have to admit that. But this is all you have to do if you want to set up a basic routing system for your application. So now I'm going to move forward with a little bit more advanced topics. First, in the page 3 component, we are going to grab that param that we sent from our home component. We have the text here, Webin is awesome, and it's now stored in this param that is called cool param here. So that's the one that we're going to grab in the page 3 component. So go inside page 3.js, import routes. We are going to create a nested route also in this component, so that's why I import them now. Route, link, and we're going to use a hook that's called use params and use navigate. From React Router DOM, do some auto formatting maybe. No, it wants to have them on one row. That's sad, but all right. Then we import page 4 from ./page 4 like that. And here we're not going to do an implicit return, so we have curly braces instead because we are going to use these hooks here. So that's why we can't do that. So we have a return statement, parentheses, and we can create a fragment. We end the fragment, and inside of our fragment, just as before, we have an h2 tag, page 3. We have a p tag. This is the URL. We are going to grab our URL that we send into this one, but let's specify all of the JSX first. We have a link that is going to go to / p tag, go to home, just as before. All right, remove this one, auto format it. So this is everything we need for now. And up here, we have these hooks now in React Router. That's also fairly new, the hooks API. So we're going to use that one. So we create a const. And from this one, I'm going to destructure out the cool param. And we destructure out it from use params. Really, really nice API to get the params. And this is the one that we specified in the app component. We want this param to be called cool param. And in the home component, where we go to page 3, we have this one here. So that's the one that we're grabbing. Go back to the page 3 component. So here in the p tag, this is the URL param. And then we can use the cool param that we just destructured like that. Save the file, go back to our application, and we can go to page 3, and you can see this is the URL param. Weben is awesome. And you can see that this is the one that's up here. And this is great when you want some data. For example, in my beginner React course, I use this one where I have an ID of a movie. So this ID is obviously going to change for each movie. So I can grab that one. And with that ID, I grab data from the API. So that's how you send along a param that you can use for a page. So in my case, I grab different content depending on the ID of the movie. So really, really handy if you want to send along a param to the route. So that's the basic stuff for sending along params. We have this nice hooks API now, and it makes it a breeze. So that's great. As the last thing in this video, I'm going to create a nested route. So I'm also going to navigate to this route programmatically with a button instead of using the link component. And I'm going to send along some state also to that one to show you how you can send along data that you don't want to have in the URL. Because you maybe want some data, but you don't want to have it up in the URL as the cool param. So that's what I'm going to do. So down below the link here, create a button, on click equals. I'm going to create a function that's called handle click. So handle click, camel cased. Go to nested page 4. All right, that's our button. And then you can set up nested routes, just as we did before with the routes component. You wrap them in the routes component, and then we set up the route just as before, path equals page 4. And the element is going to be the page 4 component. And we self-close this one, do some auto formatting. Don't know why it's changed this fragment all the time. That's very annoying. You should have the end fragment here, of course. Then we create the handle click function, const handle click equals. I'm using arrow functions as usual. And I'm going to use something that's called navigate. And that one, we can grab that from const navigate. I'm putting it in a const that I call navigate. And I call the use navigate hook. So this is the one that we use in React Router 6. Before that, you had something that's called history. But this one, instead, they are changing this one to be called use navigate instead. And that's the one I think that you also use in Reach Router. So they're going for that API there instead. Yeah, I actually think it's a better name of this hook. We run the use navigate hook and we put what we get back in the navigate const. And from that const, that's a function that we get back. We can navigate programmatically, and that's great. So first, we navigate to the page 4. This is a string. And then, as I told you, I want to send along some data to this route that won't necessarily be seen in the URL. And how can we do that? Well, we can have an object here, and we have something that's called state inside of this object. And for this one, I want to send along a message. So I create another object with a message prop. And I have a string. This is Weben saying hi. All right, do some auto formatting, and this should be it. So we have this state property on the routes, and I send along a message. You can have as many props inside of this object as you want. In this case, I have this string. So save the file. Let's go back to our application. You can see that I have a button here. Go to nested page 4, and it shows the page 4 component here down below the button, very small. Yeah, something like that. Now you can probably see it. Page 4, it's down below the button here. We have nested this component with the page 3 as a parent. I'll go back inside of the code. And in the page 4 component, we have to do some stuff also. So we import the link and use location. Use location is another hook that we can use to get the location data from the router, from React Router DOM. And just as before, we can't do an implicit return because we're going to use a hook. So we have curly braces. We have a return statement with parentheses, a fragment. And inside the fragment, we have an h2 tag. I want to be consistent here, page 4. And we have a p tag. And I'm going to show the message. And we can grab the message from the location object. So use location is a hook that we can use here. Const location equals, we call the use location hook. So I put the data I get back in the location const, like that. We can console log it out. And down below here again, inside of our p tag, from location dot stayed, I have my message like that. Location. All right. And then we can have a link back to the start page, link to / the p tag, and go to home. Auto format it, and also have to remove this one here because it adds that one. All right. I call the use location hook to get the location data inside of this const. I console log it out. We're going to look at that in a second. Then I have my message here. That's the one that I send along from page 3. You can see here on the state, I have the message. So that's the one that page 4 is going to get on its location object. And this one is only going to be seen on page 4 because we're sending it specifically into that route. All right. And then I have a link to the home page here again, as we had before. So save this one, go back to our application, reload page 4. You can see that I'm showing my message here. This is Weben saying hi. So that's great. It's working. And we can look at the location object here. We have a hash. That's nothing inside of that. We have a specific key for this route. We have the path name, so we can see where we are. And we have the state object here, and you can see my message. So this is great when you want to send along data to that route that you don't want to have up in the URL to be visible to everyone up here. Just going to show you one small little thing more. If we go back to the app component, I use this asterisk here. So I'm going to remove this one for the page 3 route just to show you what it does. You can see it won't show us the page 4 component now. This isn't working if we're not using the asterisk there because we're telling it here to show the page 3 component on all the descendant routes. And if we don't do that, it won't show us that because we look here, we have the page 4 here also added to the route. So it won't show it if you don't use the asterisk. All right, that was a lot, I think. This video became a little longer than I thought, but hopefully you learned something about routing. This is all the stuff that you need to know about routing in a single page application if you don't do some really, really advanced stuff. Please make sure to subscribe to my channel. I'm going to put out videos like this weekly in this channel. See you in another one.